Hello, welcome to today's session. My name is Katie Olson, and I'm really excited to introduce you guys to some of the experts from the fascinating world of predictive marketing. Just a heads up, we will be recording this and sending it out to everyone who signed up, whether they're here live or not. Our hope is by the end of this webinar, you have a pretty good grasp on some tactics and tools that you can leverage for your own marketing programs. If you happen to think of any questions during the session, feel free to use your Q&A widget. It's located at the bottom of your screen. We will be saving some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. That is all my housekeeping. I'm pleased to introduce to you Fulcrum Tech's own CEO, Mitch Lapidus. Mitch?
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've been planning for this day for quite a while, and we are super excited that you are all able to attend today. My name is Mitch Lapidus, and I am the CEO and founder of Fulcrum Tech. We're a full-service email marketing agency that I founded back in 2004. Email is what we do every day of the week. And with a solid focus on ROI, we do everything from managing the email channel to helping clients select and implement ESPs and other tech as they may need, to delivering industry-leading dashboards to track performance and deliverability. We're going to be talking today about a really hot topic in email marketing, and that is predictive marketing. Predictive marketing has been a trend that I've seen long in the making. At the beginning of 2017, I had predicted that it would be big back in 2017. It did begin to grow, and the proliferation of companies in the space did begin to take off in 2017. And now finally in 2018, it really appears to be taking off. In fact, at every conference that I've attended this year so far, predictive marketing has received substantially more talk time versus what I experienced even a year ago. This is happening because the data science and the availability of organized data and the underlying tech for predictive subject lines or predictive website and email content and all of those supporting strategies have really hit a tipping point, and it is really exciting to see. So we discussed the topic internally here at Fulcrum Tech, and we said, we gotta get the word out about what this is all about. So we're here today to share some of the key concepts and tools you'll want to learn about to stick your toe in the water with predictive marketing. We only have an hour, and our hope is that you'll begin to understand how to think about all of this if you think it's for you. So let's dive in. With us today, we have a moderator plus 3 panelists from 3 leading companies in the predictive space. And I'd like to introduce first Monica DiBartolo, our moderator who works here at Fulcrum Tech. And Monica is our Director of Strategy and Client Services. She's been in the space for over 15 years in email at both large ad agencies as well as on the client side. She brings a deep understanding in CRM and customer journeys, which are really at the heart of predictive marketing. And I'm super excited to introduce our panelists. First, we have Dean Abbott, who's co-founder and chief data scientist at Smarter HQ. We also have Peter Maloney, who is CEO of Loyalty Builders. And finally, we've got Eddie Swindell, who is co-founder and sales and marketing director at Fresh Relevance. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Dean, Peter, and Eddie in that order, if each of you would please provide a really quick introduction of yourselves for everyone online here. And then we'll go from there.
Thanks very much, Mitch. And thank you, Fulcrum, for putting on this webinar. As you mentioned, my name is Dean Abbott. I'm co-founder and chief data scientist of Smarter HQ, a multi-channel behavioral marketing platform that enables real-time personalization for primarily B2C, some B2B clients in retail, financial services, and travel and hospitality. I've been in the predictive space, what's kind of called data science now, or sometimes AI. I've been in this space for 30 years. So yeah, that just means I'm old, and been building predictive models and operational predictive models for these decades in a wide variety of verticals. In the last 10 years, focused more on customer analytics, but in the past did a lot of fraud detection, tax compliance models, and even real rocket science.
Great. Yes, and hi. I'm Pete Maloney. I'm the current CEO of Loyalty Builders. I bring to Loyalty Builders 30 years of experience in marketing and corporate strategy, and with a particular focus in analytics technology. I've run service providers, marketing service providers in the past. I came to Loyalty Builders about 3 years ago. We provide an automated cloud-based service that delivers predictive scoring on every customer, and we serve retail and wholesale clients primarily. So, Eddie?
Hi guys, Eddie Swindell and Mitch, thanks ever so much for having me. I'm a co-founder of Fresh Relevance. We are a real-time personalization platform that increases revenue for e-commerce companies. And we do that with a very fresh take on real-time personalization and automation across different channels. The system fully integrates with different bits of marketing technology that customers already have in the business. And I'm one of the new kids on the block here, having only been in the industry for 20 years, involved in marketing data and digital marketing.
Great. Well, thank you all. And Dean, 30 years of experience, I would not argue makes you old. At least I hope not. So thanks again for your detailed introductions, and thanks so much to all of you for being part of the session today. It's exciting to have everyone online, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Monica, who will get us right into the content.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mitch. I'm really excited to dive into this world of predictive marketing because it's really so important these days. It's really important to know your customer and be able to market to them on a one-to-one level at mass. And this supports relevancy and maintaining an engaged audience and being able to send the right message at the right time to the right user. This is a quick overview of what we plan to cover today. We're going to discuss why predictive marketing is so important, how it can be applied and improve our marketing efforts, and take a look at the landscape of tools. We're also going to talk a bit about what's working. We're going to bust a few myths, and then we'll get to everybody's questions and we'll be able to answer them. So please use your question and answer widget at the bottom of your screen, as was mentioned earlier, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So jumping right in, why is predictive marketing so important? For starters, it can make your teams more effective and efficient, but it's also necessary to be able to keep up with your competition these days. As marketers, we want to be sure we're implementing strategies that's going to increase our ROI. And you can see here that eMarketer reports that brands that use technology and data to offer personalized experiences are seeing revenue increases of up to 10%. And McKinsey is claiming that marketing based on real-time needs can boost sales by 15 to 20%. And seeing increases like these really perks up my ears. Dean, do you have any increases that you're seeing or some performance metrics that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, it's interesting. Predictive audiences really focus and target particular populations. And we've seen open rates 40, 45% for predictive audiences. Click-through rates over 10%, sometimes 15%, and conversion rates on the order of 33, 34% for focused audiences of thousands of shoppers based upon those predictive behaviors.
Wow.
Yeah, we see similar things, Dean. I would say as a rule of thumb, and we've done this with many clients, we can increase conversion rates or revenue from marketing campaigns over traditionally focused campaigns by 10 to 30% is pretty common. Sometimes we knock it out of the park, and there's a big lift depending on much bigger lift depending on what our clients have done before and the availability of data and how accurate we can make the predictive models. But it definitely has a big impact on our clients in easily 10 to 15, 20, 30% range.
And we certainly echo the same findings here. In fact, the results that we see across our customer base match quite closely to that of McKinsey here. One of the high-level metrics we use is looking at the uplift in online revenue that's attributed to these types of programs. And it's quite common for us to see sales uplifts in the region of 10 to 15% of online revenue. And that's revenue that's directly attributed to these predictive programs.
That's fantastic. So we all know that data is really important to predictive marketing and we can increase revenue, but the big question is how? How do we go about doing that? So historically, segmentation's been used as a solution for some of these challenges. If you were really advanced, you may have been applying models such as RFM, which is recency frequency monetary, to help identify the value of your contacts. With all the marketing channels and automations available today, it's really challenging to get to that single customer view. When we work with our clients here, we focus on ROI and testing, and many times it's still a manual process. It can sometimes be time consuming and expensive, and we know we need to be able to improve precision and targeting and personalized experiences to increase the lifetime value. We want to be able to better understand when our contacts may go inactive or churn. And to dive into these insights, many times we're manually manipulating and analyzing raw data. This seems to be among some of the bigger challenges of marketers and agencies. And many of the predictive tools we're finding can help with a lot of efficiencies by being able to generate these insights quite quickly. So that said, being able to market at a one-to-one level at mass means we're anticipating and ready for the next piece of content or lifecycle communication that's going to resonate with our customers. We're not only personalizing, but also personifying our interactions. Our brands have a voice, and we're holding conversations with our customers who also have an identity. With access to so much information, there needs to be a subtleness that really doesn't cross that line of becoming too creepy for our customers. So to take that down a level, what we do about these challenges, because it can be so expensive and challenging. In Omar Arton's book on predictive marketing, it does a great job of boiling down the types of questions that we need to answer with predictive data. You can see them listed here. And without the right data sets in place, we really wouldn't be able to power these predictive engines. So I do want to ask the experts, what kind of data is required to get into the game of predictive marketing? What are the easiest and obvious data sets that are available? And what are the ones that really present a challenge? Dean, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'd like to start with two Captain Obvious moments. The first is that if we want to understand customer behavior, like some of the questions you hear of finding out new customers, we need to have data at the customer level, not at an aggregated level. So oftentimes the data we have is aggregated up to group statistics. So we really need more granular level data, what individual customers did. The second Captain Obvious moment is to understand what people will do. It's best if we know what they did. And so understanding historic behavioral characteristics, like what kinds of transactions did customers engage? What kinds of products did they transact on? What was the total value of their transactions? That's at a basic level where we need to go first. But then adding and layering on top of that other characteristics that uncover at the individual shopper level what they did, so that we can understand their intent better. And we'll be getting more into that in later part of this webinar.
Great. Eddie, did you want to?
Sure. So the main building blocks from our experience in terms of data, as Dean said, it's information on the individual. And that is certainly in e-commerce, what have people bought online? Moving on from there, it's not just what people have bought online, but what have they been interacting with? And moving on a stage further, we're in an age where most high street stores also have e-commerce stores. What people have actually bought offline. You know, a customer is a customer, irrespective of how they're interacting with the brand. So these are the three key building blocks that we certainly need to implement these predictive programs: customer behavioral data and transactional data being online or offline.
Sure. In our experience, so this is Pete from Loyalty Builders, it's very easy to want to answer all kinds of questions about your customer. As soon as you get more enriched data, more information about customers, you just want more, and you want to use it in so many different ways and so many different places that there's a temptation to try and do too much at once. And I think one of the things that we would all counsel is to start small, start simple, and move incrementally into more complex things. So if you want to know how to target a particular marketing campaign, you might start with, well, who is likely to be the most interested to buy something in that particular campaign period. You might want to know who's going to spend the most in that particular campaign period. There's certainly, you know, if you want to know things about loyalty and general lifetime value sorts of things, that's fine. But if you're trying to target an email campaign, you might start with propensity to buy. Although there are many other questions you can answer with predictive analytics, you might start with the simple KPIs or questions that you need to sort of execute a campaign more effectively.
That's wonderful. So just to summarize, I'm hearing that you start with some of the data that you already have, the questions that you're already answering. You then layer in different types of data: behavioral, transactional, online, offline, and then it sounds like identifying KPIs and really, you know, taking it from there. So with all of these data's available, there's really so much at work behind the scenes. There's artificial intelligence or machine learning that we hear about all the time. There's also a lot of different data methodologies and maybe even multiple methodologies at work. And it's what we do with that data. If it's coming from an e-commerce platform or your back-end systems, how do we make sense of it and bring it down to technologies that, and there's really like big three buckets there. These aren't the end all and be all of all data models and methodologies in the marketplace, but it's a good overview. When thinking how you can use your data strategically, you can consider these three models. So clustering is focused on segmentation. It's clustering like actions of individuals together. So creating that group or that cluster. So for example, if a contact recently took a certain action or purchased a certain product, it's finding other people that did like activities. And then propensity takes a look at past behavior to predict the future, which we were just hearing quite a bit about. And this can be used to improve lifetime value, identify when someone may be at risk for becoming non-engaged, or many other applications. And then collaborative filtering is much like the Amazon model, which is where you take a look at what other like individuals have done, and because somebody took a certain action, they are likely to take another action. So with Amazon, they do it for product recommendations. If somebody else buys this product and 3 others, and then you bought one of those, they will use that to recommend other products that may be of interest. We want to really bring this down. There are so many different tools out there that can help with predictive marketing and in so many different ways. It sometimes becomes difficult to find the right tool for the right job. And a lot of these companies, they'll focus on one aspect or many aspects within this funnel. And this funnel is really shaped to support the life cycle through an email process. So you identify your audience, you might have some subject line optimization in there, some send time optimization, product recommendations, maybe even dynamic content, and then it's really driving through to that click out to the web. So if we're taking a look and organizing some of these into how they can help, for example, Phrasee and Persados to help with subject line optimization, and 7 Cents and Audience Point can do send time optimization. I want to ask Eddie, can you talk a bit about the marketing tech stack and a way that our audience can sort of organize all of the different aspects of predictive marketing?
Absolutely, and certainly looking at such a range of tools, the question often is, you know, what tools do we actually need in place? And certainly to answer that, we need to look ahead of where we want to be And we also need to look back at where we've come from and the tools that we've currently got in place. As with most things in life, things tend to evolve. What happens today comes from what happened yesterday, and what happens tomorrow comes from what happened today. And so the right tools to use can often depend on what you already have in-house. So we've talked a bit already about data, and we're going to do a lot more than that. Certainly the building blocks of any kind of predictive analytics or program hinge on data. And so in terms of selecting tools, one needs to ask, what data have you got and where is it stored? It may be that you're using MailChimp, or it may be that you're using a top-end enterprise email service provider that's got good data management capability. It may be that you don't have that kind of capability in-house, in which case it becomes imperative to actually look for a tool that you can actually store and start aggregating data to apply models and get insight on the customers. So that would be companies like Agile One. Certainly Smarter HQ and Fresh Relevance both have a degree of data management capability. But with that in place, with that insight, how do we actually use the insight? And that opens up some other doors. We want to use this insight to apply predictive models and targeting to our customers and prospects. And that's going to be done using content across different channels. And so the kind of content that's going to be appropriate here needs to be addressed. Subject line is certainly a kind of content, and predictive tools or AI applied to subject line optimization can be incredibly useful for very high volume senders sending lots of emails. If there's a lower frequency, a lower email cadence, then the kind of content that's likely to be more useful is the content that appears inside of the email. Product recommendations, location-based content, real-time content at the point of open that's applying those predictive models to drive content to be relevant to the individual at that particular moment in time. Another point with predictive analytics and modeling is actually the execution. And by that I mean, what channels are we looking at here? We can look at email in isolation, in which case there's an awful amount of capability in most of the major marketing clouds or email service providers. But if we're looking at applying these predictive models or targeting tactics across different channels, then that capability needs to be in place as well too. Ideally, these kind of predictive models should permeate every single touch point that one has with the customer. And there are tools amongst these, including Fresh Relevance, Smarter HQ, Bluecore, that can provide this layer of intelligence to drive predictive personalization and marketing automation actually built on top of the other bits of marketing tech that you already have inside the business.
That's wonderful. Really great. It's really interesting to see how all of these things can layer on top of each other and start to work together. And Peter, I was wondering, without giving away your secret sauce, can you talk a bit about how companies like yours are applying the use of data and real-time information to step up the game in contextual marketing? What kinds of campaigns can be conceived and what kind of ROI can be generated?
Sure. So clients can use this kind of information for targeting is a very important thing. So it's no matter what you've got, and you don't necessarily need to start by building on all sorts of infrastructure. Often you can start with infrastructure you have. Ultimately, you need ways to get good predictions about customer buying behavior so that you can target them a little more accurately. Who's going to buy a certain product? That you might be promoting? Who's going to be in the market or spend enough money to justify the cost and expense? And when you have that sort of thing, you want to make sure it's accurate. If it's not accurate, then it's not really that useful. And in order to make it more accurate, you'll probably have to spend more to get more information to make your models a little more effective, or find a way to get data that's accurate. So ultimately, you want to find out if you have accurate information, because if you know what products somebody's interested in, then you can use it to target product promotions, or you can use it to make recommendations to customers, or you can use it to target customers that perhaps who were loyal, but now have been detected to be falling off in their buying behavior and perhaps moving toward defection. So you want to move in and intervene at the right time. And this sort of information can tell you before they've defected, before they've become too risky as a customer to retain, how to go after them and when to go after them and what to talk to them about. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that you want to do, but you want to try to do things that are going to be basically give you a return, the most return for the amount of cost that you're going to invest in it. I would start simply and use it for almost any campaign that you're targeting. Data can be used to augment or enhance almost anything. You start by doing that, by enhancing what you're already doing, the processes, the systems, the types of campaigns you're doing. And then eventually you move toward using the data to inform the kind of marketing strategy that you ought to be doing because the data is telling you that.
Yeah, Peter, that's a really great segue to what I wanted to talk about next, and that's the predictive maturity considerations in terms of data complexity and model complexity, and how we start small, maybe with something that we're already doing, like shopping cart abandonment, and then going beyond that. So, Dean, can you think of this predictive marketing maturity model that goes from basic to the most sophisticated, and then taking it that step beyond shopping cart abandonment, and just really how do things layer on to become easily available based on tool set versus relatively simple to implement?
Yeah, I think that's. I like this picture. I think it's a good way to think about the maturity considerations we want to take on when we're thinking about predictive marketing in general. And I agree with my fellow panelists that starting simple and starting smaller, especially for organizations that are new to predictive marketing and using predictive techniques, is a wise thing to do, because we're always going to be learning as we apply these predictive techniques, learning how they work, what works best for the organization. And just because we identify good audiences, we have to marry up creative with those audiences. So, but in terms of data complexity, we've already heard, Peter was talking about this in particular, that transactional data is a good place to start because that's what people did. We can look at the products they purchased and understand things like the cadence, the kinds of products, the product categories they're interested in, and then when they're likely to purchase again, and build out the models to help us understand that kind of information. But then the next level of complexity that sits on top of that is understanding more about shopper intent by including other dimensions. And the mental picture I have in my mind is like an Excel spreadsheet that we're looking at rows and columns, where the rows are shoppers or shoppers and sessions, and the columns are things we know about them. And so transactional data could be some of the columns, and then we can add browse behavior on top of that. What products did you view? What categories did you view? And that enables us to do more, because then we can look and see which shoppers were highly engaged with like men's running shoes, but never converted. And what messaging should we create around that type of persona? Or we can look and see what shoppers were highly engaged on the website, never convert in store. Maybe they've never converted online before, they only convert in store, but they haven't converted in store recently. So we can create triggered campaigns based upon the understanding how engaged they are now and try to help them complete the purchase through their browse behavior or through search terms and understanding what things they're looking at. The more we collect to understand their intent, and the more columns we add to that Excel spreadsheet, to use that analogy, the more complex the data is, and ultimately the more complex the models become, because they have to incorporate many more dimensions, sometimes dozens or even hundreds of dimensions of shopper behavior.
Really interesting. And Eddie, do you have anything you'd like to add? Maybe talk about maybe some strategies or applications of how these layer on top of each other and become really complex? Eddie, you may be on mute.
You're absolutely right. I was on mute. I do apologize.
No worries.
The first example that I'd like to give is actually speaking to shopping cart example, a shopping cart abandonment as an example that you've already given as being, you know, a really good baseline, a good starting point for some kind of predictive program. And it's been proven to work. But actually, we can actually increase the sophistication here with an understanding of shoppers and products. There's a concept that I like to call product lifecycle fit, which actually looks at the products on an e-commerce website or any store. Are these products that are once in a lifetime transactions? Are they replenishable products? A good example is a really big furniture site that sells all sorts of furniture, from full kitchens through to bedroom lighting. Of course, the decision-making process for each of these product types is very different. And actually, the communication and the cadence of the programs they should go into should reflect the purchasing decision, the product lifecycle fit. Another example, just talking about the about behavioral data and how that's used. Obviously, for any of these models, it's imperative to understand not just what people have been buying, but what they've been interacting with. And we can look at the fact that someone's interacted with a pair of Nike trainers. But actually, the more that we can understand about the products that they've interacted with, the more that we can understand about the people and spot trends. For example, is it a black pair of Nike trainers? Is it a size 10? Which of these product attributes have got significance for our marketing, for our predictive models? When we start looking into these product variants like that, it makes it possible for us to spot anomalies, sorry, easy for me to say, these situations where somebody may not be buying for themselves, but gifting. So the more that we can actually layer or go deeper into the data, the more complex those models can be to actually cater for these different scenarios, which is really, really important when it comes to actually predicting what people should be shown to drive conversions online.
And if I could jump in, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I could jump in with just one additional comment to that, which was really helpful, Eddie. I love the way you described that. Just that simplest example of shopping cart abandonment, we can view that as a very straightforward process that works tremendously well for many clients, many retailers. However, every abandonment's not the same. Some abandonments are really wish lists. Others are true abandonment where people are considering other things before they make the purchase. So having predictive models that indicate what's the likelihood they'll convert or what's the cause of the abandonment can help you fine tune the message so that the message is even more personalized and precise for that shopper.
Dean, it's a really, really, really good point. And that phenomenon is one that we see time and time again, where the shopping cart's being used as a wish list. And in that case, it often pays to look at the actual products that are in the shopping cart. Are they complementary or are they alternatives?
Yes.
If there's a vast amount of alternative products in the shopping cart, it might really pay to show a really big, rich, high-res image of the first product they carted, or another way of identifying the most appropriate product they carted, rather than showing thumbnails of a large number of different alternative products. So it's a really, really good point, and I don't think we should underestimate actually the techniques that can be applied to what are seemingly these very simple programs.
So I also think you don't want to underestimate the complexity of building out all these different ideas. It can be great and can be a lot of work. But I think all of us on this panel, we provide ways of making this whole process a lot simpler. So there are, pre-researched models that do certain things that can be employed so that you don't have to build these kinds of models that do these kinds of things yourself. And they're made available through different platforms, different services. We offer ours as a cloud service that actually produces a lot of very interesting metrics automatically, so you don't even have to build any models because we've put 15 years into doing that. So there are a lot of ways, because the models can become more complex, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that that you as a retailer or an end user have to take on all that skill and responsibility and cost of building out all those different things. There's a lot of technology out there to help.
Yeah, that's really great. And being a bit of a data geek myself, I feel like I could talk about all of this all day long, but I do want to give us a chance and give our audience a chance to hear about some real world applications of the way these technologies are used and the kinds of things that we can do. So, Dean, would you like to start us off with talking about re-engaging the disengaged?
Yeah, we've had one style of program that we use for lots of clients because we're a SaaS platform and we have common infrastructure across all of our clients. And there was one particular client that had great success with this high value disengaging audience. So what we do is we score every shopper every day with how engaged they are with the brand. And that engagement is really an ongoing estimate of their estimated dollar spend. And as they're engaged, as they're browsing different products on the site, they're accumulating these scores and appearing to be more engaged. Now, if they're a high value shopper, they've converted in the past and were highly engaged at some point in recent history, maybe 90 to 200 days prior to today, and now they're disengaging, which means their engagement score has dropped down below a certain threshold, we create a new campaign that runs daily for this particular client and for all the clients who use this kind of approach that identifies that churn risk, disengaging shoppers who were highly engaged before, and then creates a message that's custom for them, personalized for them based upon the kinds of things they've been viewing in the past. And what we've seen with these kinds of approaches that contextualize browse behavior combined with transactional data, we see that that's the 33% conversion I mentioned before in the opening remarks. And we'll see, hundreds to thousands of shoppers fall into this segment every week. And so it's a real good ongoing campaign that generates additional revenue on top of their usual programs.
Fantastic. So, yeah, this is a really interesting example to talk through. It's quite extreme, and the client was Time Out, who are a pretty huge media company, international media company, with a really strong e-commerce element to their proposition. So their challenge in their case, and the reason why I like this is because it actually includes various different components that really need to be in place for a predictive program to really work. So their challenge is what they're actually selling is incredibly time sensitive. There's a really small window of opportunity to sell offers. There's a limited number of offers. They work a little bit like oh blimey, a big online offer company that I shan't mention. But the stock is finite, and the dimensions that they need to consider are the stock levels. They work on specific cities all across the world. So not only do we need to look at stock levels, but what products do we have in stock in a particular city? This content needs to be displayed to people based on propensity to purchase, which is calculated using both behavioral data, what categories of product has somebody interacted with, and the transactional data, what have they purchased in the past. So fairly standard data sources when it comes to creating a behavior model, but the real challenge here is how that's delivered at scale. And in this case, we're actually applying real-time content tools alongside of the behavioral targeting to show the offers that are relevant to an individual live on the website at the point an email is actually opened, that are fully aligned with where the individual is actually viewing the email. So it's looking at the behavioral, the transactional data, but also adding the real-time dimension in terms of content based on the location where the email opener currently is at the time. Now, the results that this kind of program has achieved has been phenomenal. 17% of total purchase value is now attributed to this predictive content. A huge proportion of the revenue, online revenue, actually comes from this predictive content and targeting inside of email. And as well as the uplift and the additional conversions that come with this, there's also a huge amount of resource that's saved. In fact, not only is it impossible to actually create this kind of predictive targeting at scale, but based on what was being done previously, it saves an incredible amount of time and actually really frees up the internal resource to actually work on other stuff.
That's really interesting. As I had mentioned earlier, and you just mentioned it now, a lot of these tools do help make the marketing teams more efficient. So it's really great that you called that out. And Peter, we have targeting recommendations for double-digit growth.
Sure. Yeah, this is our client, The Mountain. They're an apparel vendor, B2B and B2C. And what we did, their challenge was that they had been carpet bombing their customers with emails on a regular basis and experiencing diminishing open rates, diminishing or increasing unsubscribe rates and so forth, and not really getting as much. They could not email more to get more revenue from their customers. That was not going to work. They wanted to get more targeted, more specific, more relevant, but they also had a problem. They're not all that big, and they couldn't really afford to buy into all this infrastructure and platforms and so forth. And they couldn't afford to hire data scientists or get a lot of skills. So we worked effectively with one marketer and provided the data that that person needed to target campaigns that were basically dynamic campaigns. So one of the things that she worked on was dynamic email templates that allowed for different product images to be dropped into the rendition of an email to every individual customer. So what in the data that we provided, they provided us with, this was based on simple transaction history. We got transaction history for all their customers for the last 5 years. We use that to analyze purchase behavior. It's not all random. There is a lot of things that are related in terms of the way people buy things and what they buy and how much they spend and how often they buy and so forth. We provided through that a lot of information about the loyalty and risk and expected buying and spending of customers, but also the specific products. We analyzed every product that they sold against every customer to see what the propensity of every customer was to buy every product, which is great. I mean, so now you know that you could target any customer or target customer with something they're interested in, but you can also pick any product and see who are the customers with the highest interest in any product for product promotions and so forth, and that's fine. But if you're doing that sort of thing, you're not necessarily targeting or leveraging the data as best as you can. You're simply finding the best customers for a particular product. But in that list of best customers, there are probably many customers where a different product, they may have a higher propensity of interest for a different product. But by personalizing and putting in the template, say the top 3 or 4 or 6 products for every individual customer in the time frame of the campaign, not general propensities overall for certain types of products, but in the time frame of the campaign, what are the top 3, 4, 6, whatever the template would support for each customer, and showing every customer a different set of products definitely has a big impact, and it leverages the highest propensities of every customer. And we always test. So this is all about testing and optimization. Data has to be applied. So we always compare against a control group that got business as usual, kind of an email, static email, and see how much more spending, how much more response rates we can get out of customers who are targeted in that personalized way. In this case, this is just one example of about a 20% to 22% lift in buying and buyers and spending. But they've implemented this over the last year and doing about 2 of these campaigns a month, roughly. And the average increase in revenue in each campaign is around 36%. So it's definitely effective.
It's really great. Really great ROI being seen there. We do want to get to some Q&A, but before we do, we're going to do some myth busting first. So if you do have questions and you haven't sent them in yet, please use your Q&A widget, and we're going to get to as many questions as we can. First, we're going to bust a couple myths. We have the first myth: artificial intelligence is the answer. Eddie, you want to take this one?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So AI is the answer. Well, maybe. I mean, firstly, just to dispel the myth, there's a huge amount of misinformation in the marketplace as to the true definition of AI. With some exceptions, I think Phrasee, as previously mentioned, is a very good example of AI that applies language analytical modeling to predict subject lines. However, the majority of what purports to be AI in the marketplace is really machine learning. It runs from algorithms, and it's machines making decisions based on those algorithms, but they don't necessarily learn. Now, just looking at the market leading AI platforms in the marketplace, we often use the analogy of a baby with an encyclopedia. They actually need teaching. And in fact, the amount of effort that needs to go into teaching an AI platform to come up with any meaningful results can actually be incredibly vast. So is AI the answer? It's certainly interesting watching this develop, but I wouldn't be under any illusion that what purports to be AI is actually machine learning. In fact, a lot of what we're talking about here with predictive analytics is the foundations for AI. That's what AI will be based on in future. So I think horses for courses. There are some areas where AI can be applied beautifully. I think analyzing language is one of those examples. But in other areas at the moment, I will put my neck on the line and say AI is really not the answer currently.
Yeah, next to Eddie, if I could jump into that, I really resonate with your answer and agree with it, because AI, the core of AI, when people talk about AI today, they're talking about things like deep learning networks and natural language processing and those kinds of things. There is nothing magic in AI or in deep learning networks. It is just math. It's multiplication, it's addition, it's exponentials, those kinds of basic functions. And whether you have complex math or simpler math, going back to that maturity model that we described before with data complexity and model complexity, the AI complexity is greater, so they can find more subtle patterns in the data with the more complex algorithms. But there's really nothing magic there. So I really do go back to what we're emphasizing before. Start simpler. Don't worry about wearing an AI hat. Start simpler with even statistical methods. Or if you don't have those kinds of data scientists on staff, leverage some of these solutions like the ones represented here that take over a lot of the complexity of the model building, and you can use those models and understand them qualitatively, even if you don't know exactly how to build a purchase propensity model or recommendations.
That's great. Thank you both. It's really interesting to start to dive into AI and machine learning and really just understand the nuts and bolts and the fact that, we really do need to still teach it in order for it to be effective for us. I do want to leave 10 minutes for Q&A because I'm sure we're getting quite a few questions in. So I'm going to skip over the next couple of myths that we had and turn it over to Katie to open it up to some of those questions from the audience.
All right, we do have quite a few rolling in. Remember, you can use the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A widget. So if you have burning questions, make sure you go there. I'm monitoring all of them for you. So first question is for you, Eddie. A tough one. It's a big question. How will GDPR impact the way that these tools are being used?
Oh, wow. That is a really big question, and I'll try to answer that as succinctly as possible. For those of you that haven't come across GDPR, it's something that's major happening in our industry. It's new data privacy regulations that's coming out affecting not just European countries, but actually any country that does business with Europe, or even any company based in the US that might have a customer that accesses your website from Europe. So it really is quite broad and all-encompassing. There are a few things I think to answer really, really quickly here about how this might affect how we're using these tools. Firstly, with talking about email permissions, it does change the way that permissions need to be gathered and the record of those permissions stored, so that we do still have the rights to email people covered by GDPR. If that's something that's part of your business, it's definitely something that you should have a look at. Certainly in terms of data, GDPR actually specifies very clearly rights of your customers in GDPR. They're called data subjects. And just to mention a couple of those data subject rights that are going to have an impact here, one being the right to know, all of your customers covered by GDPR have got the right to ask you for all of the information that you process, that you hold against them. And that's going to include all of the data that's used to create these predictive models. So whatever system that data is in, if your customers' data subjects are covered by GDPR, you need to be able to access that data and provide that to your customers upon request in a machine readable format. Secondly, the right to be forgotten. Data subjects have got the right to actually say to you, I don't want you to store any data on me at all. And so we need to make sure that the systems are in place to store and get insight from the data have actually got the propensity to get rid of data on an individual level. And that can be quite complex because this could be one or a number of systems that are actually processing data on your behalf. So in a nutshell, that's some of the key things that could impact us here with GDPR. I'm more than happy to go into any level of detail explaining this. We work with lots of European clients and US clients that do business in Europe, helping them through this process. So if anyone would like to go into more information, do please drop me a line afterwards.
Great, thank you. Next one's for Peter. Peter, we've talked about a little bit about pilot test programs in the past. We know that they exist. What does a pilot test program look like, and what would I get from it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things to understand about getting data by itself, data about customers, maybe you can get predictions about when somebody's going to buy or what they're going to buy, doesn't really do anything. You have to use it and you have to work with it. And a prediction, interesting, a prediction, a probability to buy, that probability could be something like 10%. It doesn't sound very high. But that probability may be 10 times more than this group of customers over here that only have a 1% chance of buying. So what you're really using this data for is to increase the odds of success by targeting a group of customers with a much higher probability of buying than some other group of customers with a much lower probability, just as an example of buying a certain product or whatever. So in order to find out whether that's true, you have to test it. So you want to, and sometimes, we see that we can target customers with definitely an interest to buy, but the marketing itself, the campaign itself, isn't necessarily the motivating factor. It could be that those customers were going to or not going to buy anyway. So there needs to be a test program. It may be other metrics, it may be other ranges of customers, different loyalty groups and so forth that respond better to marketing what a certain message is. So the data itself is just data. It doesn't mean, it doesn't turn into money automatically. It has to be worked. And so we help our clients implement a pilot program that helps you use the data, starting, of course, with things they're already doing, the systems they already have. They don't have to do any modeling because we have all these rich predictions about customers. It's a matter of, are they going to work for you? And so let's use it out in a campaign. We'll set up tests that target a customer a certain way, personalize perhaps or make something relevant, or maybe version a couple of versions a certain way based on propensities, and then compare that to a control group that either doesn't get any communication or gets a static communication or something like that, and start to iterate around that. It's all about agile marketing. What we really are doing with this data, what this data really means is helping clients to become more data driven, not because they're going to have a magic bullet, this particular metric that they're going to get that's going to be magic and suddenly spike revenue for them. It's going to be because they're getting more intelligence. They're getting smarter about how they're targeting, and they're using it, and they're learning from an iterative process of agile testing and optimization that continues for a long time. And then you start working, you learn from that, you start building on your models, and you start getting a little more complex, and you start bringing in some more data and seeing if you can even optimize beyond that. You start small, you start slow, and then you build incrementally from there. It really doesn't end.
That sounds really great. That's, the way we do a lot of testing in other channels as well. So
I have one more burning question if I have time, Monica.
Sure, absolutely. And sorry for the interruption there.
No, you're fine. So there's so many tools out there. Dean, I think I want you to answer this one. What's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of where I even get started for a mid-size as well as larger companies?
Well, it's It's a complex environment out there. I mean, there are lots of vendors that do predictive marketing in one way, shape, or form. So there's a few core questions that one needs to ask, I believe. And one of them is, where does your data live? Is it data that you are collecting and managing and maintaining, or is it data that you want the vendor to collect, manage, and maintain? And so some of uh, the vendors on any one of the NASCAR slides you might see about different vendor logos, they have different styles in how they handle the data. So that's one question. Another question is about what kind of data is collected and what data can be leveraged for the business cases and use cases you have specifically. You know, Peter talks about loyalty data, and if that's the focus for your organization, those are the business questions you want to answer, then understanding their ability to handle loyalty programs is important. If your questions are more about abandonment, shopping cart abandonment, browse abandonment, then other clients, other vendors will handle those better. So I think the first question is understanding what your core business questions you're trying to address with any of these solutions is, and then asking the questions of those vendors and how they can accomplish those. I think one last thing, if I could piggyback one more item on this. We've alluded to it a little bit, but there may be a lot of complexity with the actual models that are under the hood. But depending on whether you have to build it or the SaaS company or the vendor that is providing the modeling services for you, depending on who builds it, that level of complexity may not be something that you really have to be concerned about. They may have like Smarter HQ, we have an automated process for building out our models. And so how complex those models are, really, it doesn't matter to the client per se, because they don't have to go through the process and build it. But the better your organization understands modeling, data science, the better you'll be able to assess which solutions are right for you.
That's awesome. We've had a lot of really great questions coming in, and I appreciate everyone's time joining us today, both audience and panelists. It's really great to be able to hear from the experts. I know that we may not have been able to address everyone's questions, so we will take what we can and answer it offline. But if you have any additional questions or want to get in contact with anyone that spoke today, please feel free to reach out at info@fulcrumtech.net, and we'll be sure to put you in touch or get answers to your questions. So with that, want to end our wonderful webinar on predictive marketing, and thank you everyone for your time today.